Misty Morning Ranch in North Carolina at first seems like your typical small family farm. Except here you're not going to see any chickens or geese. Rather, the king of birds.
We ended up buying this property that was 60 acres kind of unintentionally. And then after we got it, we decided to look into what can we do with the property. Felt like a waste just to have all this for nothing. I was like, what's the alternative farming? This is the 21st century, come on. So I Googled alternative farming and ostrich came up and I said, the internet's trolling me. Never heard of an ostrich farm in my life. I was actually able to find another ostrich farm in Winston-Salem, Hilltop Ostrich. Gave them a call, said, this is what I want to do. And I said, can I come up? They said, yes. Went up there after about 2 months. Gabby and I talked about it, said, we've got to figure this out. Either we're doing this or not. And she said, we might as well pick the one thing we've got to mentor. Let's go for it. So in December of 2016, we got our first ostrich, 2 ostriches, Ed and Bella. The first and foremost, why ostrich? They do great under high stock density and they don't need that much land. They're their own guard animal as well. So when you start looking at like, ooh, no vets, no vaccines, they're their own guard animal. They can kind of take care of themselves. They're the most climate hardy livestock that exists. An adult is good, -20 to 120, no barn, no shelter. It takes a lot off of the farmer from knowing all these intricacies.
But ostriches come with their own challenges as well. When it's time to switch pens, these big birds are pretty hard to corral. So what makes all this chaos worth it? Turns out, ostrich is a healthier and more sustainable alternative to beef. That's right, even though it's poultry, ostrich meat tastes remarkably similar to a premium steak, but with 1/3 the fat and way less of the methane emissions than cows. So with all these advantages in ostrich farming, why don't we see more of them in the US?
The most interesting thing to me on agriculture in general is looking at it that we are a cattle country, right? We, in 1850, when a lot of countries were industrializing their agriculture, we went for cattle. Almost no other country did the same thing, mainly because we have the land to do it. So at that same time, South Africa went into ostrich, and a lot of other countries did goat, sheep, other things like that. You know, at the time, almost everybody was a subsistence farm, but our actual large agricultural farms went towards cattle. So cattle and beef really became ingrained into the US culture. And beyond that, after, I believe it was after World War II, South Africa put in a blockade to export all live ostrich products. So they couldn't do it. Actually, in 1905, the US and South Africa were racing to have the largest ostrich industry in the world. So there was a very prominent ostrich industry in the US at that time. World War I saw that go away because then it was the feathers. The feathers were making people millions. They were actually making people millionaires just off the feathers. Ever think of a 1920s flapper girl? She's gonna have a hat, and she's got a giant ostrich feather. So in the 90s, we were importing a lot of ostriches. They're imported by speculative investors, not by agricultural personnel. And what they said is, this is gonna replace beef. And as a matter of fact, when you talk about it from a true agricultural and economic standpoint, ostrich could absolutely replace beef. It is much more economical to raise, and the meat is a perfect substitute for it. So these investors tried to replace ostrich with beef at the agricultural level, and the cattlemen knew how to play the game. They lobbied Congress, and they created marketing and advertising. Anyone who's old enough remembers there's a huge commercial campaign, beef. It's what's for dinner. that was directly marketed against ostrich and any other exotics, because they wanted you to know we eat beef for dinner, nothing else. And it stuck. They knew, the cattlemen already knew the game, and they knew if you could restrict processing, you'd kill the whole industry. So that's in fact what they did. They went to processors and said, you process ostrich, we'll pull all our beef. 2014 is another milestone year. That's when millennials became a significant consumer generation. Number one is sustainability from millennials. Number two is health. Their least concern is price.
So let's take a look at some of these stats around health and sustainability. If we compare the nutritional value of ostrich with beef, we see that ostrich has 2/3 the amount of calories, the same protein content, and 1/3 the amount of fat as beef. For the same delicious taste, ostrich is a heart-healthy alternative. Now here is the main argument that ostrich is the future of red meat. Our main source of red meat right now is beef, and it's an established fact that cattle farms have major environmental impacts. Cattle are the single largest agricultural producer of methane, and cows alone spew nearly 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. Ostrich farming has much less of an environmental impact. Per pound of meat produced, it requires 3 times less water, takes 50 times less land, and emits less than 10 times the amount of greenhouse gas emissions than cattle farming. So what's the catch? Well, right now, ostrich meat is pretty expensive. Ground ostrich goes for about $15 per pound, and ostrich fillets go for about $25 per pound. Why is it so much more expensive? The main reason is startup costs.
So cattle get to use barbed wire fencing, right? A 40-acre pasture surrounded by barbed wire, boom, you can go with cattle. We cannot use temporary fencing with ostrich. They'll kill themselves on it. The 6-foot fencing that I use is significantly more expensive than barbed wire that they're going to put up. Incubators, hatchers, brooders, buildings, a lot more infrastructure. All that's going to happen at startup.
The good news is that most of these costs will decrease as the ostrich industry grows in the US, making ostrich meat a much more affordable option. So where can you buy it? Misty Morning Ranch sells the products on their online shop as well as local farmers markets. A changing world necessitates a change in diets. Misty Morning Ranch is the vanguard of the future of red meat.